I remember back in the beta, there were all these things that players were saying were overpowered. Sova's wall hacks were the most broken thing in the world, and Ray's having a rocket launcher was the stupidest thing in the world. Nowadays, people have just gotten used to those things, but I remember one thing that has existed since the beginning of Valorant that everyone said was super overpowered. I'm here to tell you this mechanic still is incredibly broken, and not only that, but it is criminally underused. The amount of uses for this one mechanic are endless, so stick with us as we go into some more and more complex examples, even saving some special ones for the end of the video. Before we get into it though, here's a real video of a SkillCapped.com subscriber covering for all of his no-com teammates in Valorant.
Sold your way, 79.
Remember, if you're really looking to climb this act, be sure to check out SkillCapped.com, link in the description below. Now, believe it or not, the one mechanic I'm referring to today is the ping system. This was something pretty wild to a lot of players at the start of Valorant. After coming from Counter-Strike with no feature like this, it kind of felt like the game was just holding players' hands. You probably used the ping system here and there, but it's definitely not talked about as much as it once was, and it has so many different actually really applicable uses. For the few that are unaware, the ping system in Valorant is the ability to press the Z key to leave a marker at the specific location you are looking toward. This can also be done by opening your map using the M or caps lock key and clicking anywhere on the map. This simple feature of the game is usually used to help players call out positional information to their team, but there are a plethora of ways to use this to make your life a bit easier. And with the system being so easy to use, many Radiant players opt to incorporate the ping system into their own gameplay since it requires no mechanical skill to execute, allowing them to reap the rewards without having a steep learning curve. Let's start with one of the most obvious scenarios for using pings, and that is for positional communication. For the average player, this is probably the most common but effective usage of the ping system, since it's pretty standard that these players might not know all of the callouts on a particular map, or may just have poor communication skills in general. If you ever find yourself having trouble relaying information to your teammates, a faster alternative to stumbling over your words is to just ping where you saw the enemy on the map and stating how many are located on the ping. 2 on ping may seem like a lackluster comm, but the ping is kinda doing most of the work for you anyway, since it just displays exactly where the enemies are for your team. This specific case is used by many Radiant players just to simplify communication, but it's not as frequent since when you do get to this rank, people's communication skills will just be better overall, resulting in not needing to rely on the ping system to communicate. But Radiant level players will use pings more often than not to communicate what angles they are holding. The reasoning behind this is because it's quite easy to have a communication error in situations where a player says that they are holding a position, but they may be holding it in a more passive way. This callout may cause their teammates to play in a spot where they are overexposed to that position, resulting in them dying because of a disconnect between the two teammates. Let's take a look at a clip from Boy's team. Boy and his teammate KO are both planted on the B site on Ascent. KO mentions to his boy that he's holding stairs and pings the exact line of sight he has. This ping from the KO gives Boy a mental image of what the exact angle he has covered, rather than just having to infer what angle the KO is holding. With this in mind, Boy holds lane while using the center Radianite boxes to cover himself from the deeper stairs angles that his KO does not have covered. If KO does not ping here, there's a decent chance that Boy may have exposed himself to the higher angles of stairs based on the assumption that his KO has stairs covered. These rarer circumstances where more in-depth communication assists may not arise in your own games as much, but they definitely will help if you choose to implement these types of pings. Anyway, to help make your communication more accurate will always be a benefit to your team. Another commonly known usage of the ping system is to ping the location of the spike in post-plant fights. This is catered toward the attackers who are in a position to hide until the defenders begin to defuse the spike. Usually this is done because a strong play that the defenders may do is smoke the spike right before they begin to defuse, causing the attacker to have to spray blindly into the smoke, hoping that they kill the diffuser if they choose to stick it. With the ping, this helps the attacker know where to aim behind the smoke to find the kill on the diffuser. Even when the defenders opt to not smoke the spike, the ping is a great addition to the attacker since it gives them a better gauge on how to position their crosshair for the peek onto the spike if they do want to check if the enemy is diffusing. As a general rule of thumb, if you are dead while spectating your teammate who's in a post-plant situation, keep a constant string of pings on the spike's location since they may forget to do this themselves. themselves, or worse, might forget where the spike is planted in the first place. It doesn't hurt to give your teammates a small reminder on where the spike is planted. I know we all have had our fair share of lost rounds because someone forgets where the spike is. Here's a brief clip from Hazed's stream where this is shown. As you can see, his teammates are in a 2v1 post-plant scenario. While the Cypher is flanking through garage window, the rest of his team have already preemptively pinged the spike's location. As soon as the enemy Sova starts to defuse on the spike, the Cypher walks out with perfect crosshair placement and kills the defender. In the grand scheme of things, this is a minor detail, but requires almost no effort at all while still helping your team. A large component of the game is having the ability to find frags with wall bangs. Now, I'm not advocating that you should get a third-party wall hack or anything, but there is essentially an in-game wall hack that comes in the form of the pings. If you're unfamiliar with the ping system, if you do ping an area of the map, not only will it leave an indicator on your minimap, but also in the physical map itself. This feature gives you an easy way to have a reference on where you need to shoot, regardless of if there is a wall in between you and your desired shooting location. Although this option is quite strong, it's not always appropriate to go through this whole process of pinging a location, then shooting through the wall if you don't have enough time. Usually, this is not the case. But there are some maps where this technique shines exceptionally. If we take a look at Haven during the barrier phase, there are two locations I want to highlight, mid-window and grass. Both of these places have some quite infamous lineups for wallbangs onto the attackers due to the nature of how the barrier is placed. The defenders have a direct wallbang angle onto where the attackers stand in order to move behind the barriers immediately. Here's the lineup for the mid-window wallbang. As you can see, the power of this wallbang is insane since it's almost guaranteed that if an enemy wanted to peek mid-window, they would have to get hit by this wallbang in order to cross. And here's a clip of Sinatra using the grass wallbang lineup to find the fastest kill recorded in Valorant history.
No, you don't have to. You can save it for like retake.
Don't be afraid to experiment with this concept on other maps too. Maybe you will find the next overpowered wallbang spot that will cause your fellow Valorant players frustration. We mentioned momentarily how we can use pings to help educate us on where we need to look for crosshair placement earlier in the video. But let's discuss this idea a bit more. Crosshair placement is one of the most important aspects when it comes to Valorant. Naturally, we would have to practice crosshair placement over and over on different maps to find out where we need to place our crosshair in order for us to peek into an angle with the least amount of readjustment needed. This intuitive feeling must be honed over multiple reps of practicing that certain angle. But before you take the peek, if you place a ping on the exact coordinate you want to peek, you will have a physical indication of where the angle you want to peek is through the wall, making it much easier to visualize the angle as you are placing your crosshair. All you have to do from that point forward is place your crosshair slightly above the marker to compensate for head level, strafe left or right until the ping is no longer behind cover, then take your shot. These types of pings can be used as a shortcut to practicing peeking crosshair placement, rather than having to spend countless hours practicing crosshair placement in other forms. We do still recommend that you should practice your crosshair placement, but this ping tip will help speed the process up a bit. The most seamless way to use this technique is for those initial duels that occur right when the round starts. A good example of this is peeking B main on split as a defender. Let's say you want to peek B main for a little bit of early information because you want your teammates to rotate earlier if possible. As the round timer is counting down, place a ping on the first angle that the attackers usually hold B main from. As soon as the barrier goes down, peek and pre-fire exactly where your ping is. If you're lucky, you'll find a free kill. If not, you still expose yourself for such a small amount of time that you're relatively safe while still gaining information for your team. This is just one example of many, so please feel free to use this as much as you can everywhere. We've already gone over how to use pings to help us shoot through walls and smokes, but what if we applied that same idea to our abilities as well? If you watch any Valorant content, you know how many lineups on YouTube and TikTok there are for all the agents in the game, but sometimes you aren't always able to set up for some obscure Sova dart lineup. This is where using pings can come in handy. Envision you're playing Sova on Haven as a defender. The attackers are scaling into A site as you're rotating from the other side of the map. As they're planting the spike on default, you notice you still have both your shock darts. You haven't spent the time doing homework on a shock dart lineup that hits the A site default plant. So instead, you ping the default plant spot and use the ping as a reference to know where to aim roughly for your shock darts, and you find a kill onto the spike planter. Much like how we referred to using the ping as a shortcut for crosshair placement, you can use the pings as an alternative method for creating lineups for your abilities. Literally, all the agents in this game can benefit from this little tip. To help cement this point, how about we look at a clip from one of Valorant's most recent star rookies, Trent. This clip starts with Trent rotating to A site on Haven after the the rest of his team have fallen and given up the bomb site. As he walks through A-Link, he notices that the entrance is covered by Omen's smoke. As he takes into account that Spike has not been planted yet, he starts to ping through the smoke in order to find where the close wall ends so he can aim his shock dart for the back wall of A site. His minimap is covered, so it's a bit hard to tell, but you can tell which ping makes it to the back wall by reading the distance underneath the pings. Once he finds the angle that reaches the back wall, he banks the shock dart so that it lands perfectly near default, causing a bit of chip damage to the enemy team. If the game gives us a free way to have pseudo wall hacks, we might as well use it to the fullest. The trend clip may not have been the flashiest way to show how useful these pings are, so let's take a look at another Sova clip of Sinatra on split. Right before the round starts, Sinatra pings both the right and left side of A main. These two pings help give him an idea of the width of the hall that the enemy attackers would have to walk through. Right when the round starts, you'll notice Sinatra aims at the right ping and quickly goes toward the left. The right ping is intended to tell him where he needs to pre-aim, and the left ping is intended to show him where the enemies are likely to be standing. He does this because Sova's ultimate has a brief windup where you're able to still correct your aim. During the opening, he makes the enemies convinced they dodged his shot, and then when he corrects, they have less time to react to it. By placing the pings on his screen, he assures he only has to focus on one area of the screen while he focuses on this mechanic. Without the pings, he'd have to stare at the minimap, which would take his attention off his mouse movements. If you missed this small little tidbit of information we shared earlier, below every ping, it will display the amount of distance between you and the ping in meters. Usually this info would be negligible in most cases, but due to how some of the guns work in Valorant, knowing the distance between you and a specific point may benefit you. If you were to take a moment to browse through the buy menu, you would notice that some weapons have different damage stats depending on how far the target is relative to you. For an easy to understand example, let's choose the Phantom. If we take a look at his damage stats, we can see that the damage changes from 15 meters and above as well as 30 meters and above. The key number we want to look at here is the headshot damage difference between under 15 meters and over 15 meters. As you can see, the Phantom does 156 damage with a headshot at close range, while in the mid-range it does 140 damage. This effectively makes the Phantom a 1 headshot kill at close ranges, while making it a 2 headshot kill at ranges farther than 15 meters. For the Phantom, a difference of 1 meter can change the strength of the gun drastically. Since this is the case, many Radiant level players will sometimes ping an angle they're holding to see what the distance is of the engagement they're about to take. If you're under this magical threshold of 15 meters, then there's no need to worry about having to hit multiple shots if you do hit them in the head. Another gun that falls prey to this mechanic is the Sheriff, since it does not one-shot headshot enemies if they're farther than 30 meters away. These are the most apparent examples, but other weapons such as submachine guns or shotguns all have these damage fall-off stats, so paying attention to the range you're fighting in is still important. When in doubt, just throw out a ping and you'll get instant feedback on the distance. We only listed a few examples of which you can use pings to assist you in your games. There are also examples of how players have used pings to find molly lineups or KO knives. There are so many different ways you can use elements in the sky along with the ping system to calculate your lineups, and mastering these things can give you a massive edge over your opponent.
How much have you ranked up since using SkillCapped?
That would be 5 times now.
I placed Iron 1 on my first act.
And what rank are you now?
Gold 1.
So I jumped from silver 2 up to plat 1 within 2-3x maybe.
What's your favorite part of the website?
I absolutely love the Smurf commentaries.
Agent courses and game sense ones.
I think the agent guides.
What was your favorite agent guide?
I think the jet one. I think it went more in depth on everything.
Is there anything that SkillCapped helped you learn that you think would have taken longer otherwise?
I think my whole aiming situation.
Like how to use the agent abilities, like the util. Before this, I was just throwing random shit. Let's say Sova, I was just drone random areas.
I didn't know about the audio cue when it comes to reload switching. Like if you hit reload and then quickly pull out your knife and switch back to your gun, the enemies will get the full audio cue, but you have your gun out.
You've come from, what was your original rank?
Bronze 1.
Bronze 1, and you're already up to Immortal, so that's really freaking cool.
Yeah.